So now we're going to take a look at the back and basically do the same thing. So the back is going to make it a little bit easier to see if there's any dirt or grime or anything like that. But so far, it's really just been the impacts and that one corner. So you can kind of see here. I'm going to try to just adjust the light just a smidge just to make sure that we're seeing. So there is a little bit what appears to be some discoloration on that edge. So this one's really where you kind of have to be careful is right now, make sure I'm still using the right one. So right now, we really have to make sure that we're not swiping back down because we don't want to peel any of that cardstock towards the middle of the card because that's how you get that whitening. So some of this is already coming off, which is kind of nice. There's a little bit of a stain here that I'm just going to try to spot treat real quick. And really, again, since it's right on that edge, I'm really not going to do too much with it aside from just kind of setting it there and again pushing away but then lifting back up and kind of doing this like circular motion just to make sure that I'm not peeling that card in any way. And so that's as good. We got a little bit, it was probably too small, but it was right next to that G, so we got a little bit of that off. But again, since it's under the microscope, we really see a lot that you typically can't see at kind of first glance. So right now we're just kind of looking around the border, some of the OG Charizard artwork, if you guys have never seen that before. And so as we kind of go across, kind of see some, you can even see some kind of some extra cardstock kind of stuck to the edge here. So like right here, right here. So something like that. We're not gonna trim or anything like that because again, trimming would be considered alteration because you're actually physically removing something from the card. So we're just going to keep kind of going down. You see a little bit of these. It's just more of just kind of some slight edge wear. So we're just going to kind of spot check these a little bit. Probably use a new Q-tip at this point. Typically, one Q-tip will go for probably like one, maybe one or two sides of a card typically, depending on how dirty it is. But since this card, obviously is pretty up there. It's it's a Charizard. We want to make sure that we treat it with respect. So at the expense of some Q-tips, which is totally fine. So we have some. You can kind of see some more bending here towards this bottom corner. And so what we're going to do, again, a lot of this is that you're probably not going to be able to see on stream, is that this will try to fold over once we get the humidor treatment. So try to treat that. So this one right here, so that appears to be some dirt or something like that where the tip of my Q-tip is. So we're going to see. And again, if you guys are trying to see exactly what I'm talking about more on the top part of the screen, if you hold or swipe, I can't remember which on TikTok, you should be able to see the full screen without all the stuff on the top. So definitely keep that in mind if you're trying to see exactly what I'm doing. So as I'm, again, so you can kind of see it lightening up a little bit. I'm just kind of right at what I'm doing right now is, since the Q-tip is a little bit moist, I'm just kind of letting it sit there for a little bit and then seeing if I can take a few passes, trying to remove a little bit as much as I can without putting too much pressure. Especially on stream, you really can't tell how much pressure I'm putting on the card. And aside from me just kind of holding it here, once I kind of wipe off, I'm really not putting that much pressure. So you really have to be careful on how much pressure you're actually putting onto these cards because you don't want to cause any adverse damage or anything like that. So it did get a little bit lighter, but this is something that, truthfully, since it's really kind of stuck on there and I'm not really feeling anything at the moment, that tells me that there's really nothing else for me to really remove from that spot. So that stain is going to be there for a little bit, because if I were to pursue it any harder or any more or anything like that, I'm starting to increase the chances of causing some issues. So we're going to leave that alone. In addition, you can probably see up here too that these corners are starting to get a little bit frayed, and there is a slight bit of discoloration here. And so there's really nothing I can do in that point, because since the fraying is starting to come back into the center of the card, if I were to try to spot check this or treat this, there is a potential that the whitening could get worse. So I'm just going to kind of leave that as is. So some of you might be thinking about, what are the corners? And if you do see something like this, for example, this is a really good one. That's exactly what I'm kind of talking about. So you see a little bit of edge wear here, and kind of that cardstock already being removed, and that inner kind of whiter layers being shown when it's slightly stained. That's something I don't want to kind of treat with any of the distilled water. You kind of see some of that hollow foil from the top layer kind of showing, peeking through. And so once I'm done on the sides here, then we'll get to the center of the card. This is the first time I've actually cleaned a Bandai card, so trying to be extra cautious here. The techniques are, more or less the same. There's really no big difference as to what I would be doing, but with any new card, especially from a community member, we want to make sure that we're as careful as we possibly can. So here's one that probably be 2 dirt marks. So right here by this Z character, I apologize, I'm not too sure what that actually is called. But we also have one here. So we're going to try to treat this one in the blue section here real quick. And that just came right off. You can kind of see me kind of moving that around. And so another thing I like to do is if I do have something that sticks onto a Q-tip, I tend to just swap it out immediately. There's no need to kind of keep hold of it. So we're just going to swap out once more. And then we're going to address that other one here in a second. So again, make sure that your Q-tip is a little bit moist, probably about 5%. Because we don't want to soak this card at all, especially with this card having frayed edges. We don't want to actually put water into that kind of middle layer. We don't want it to absorb as much as kind of like a humidor treatment will. So we kind of keep that in the back of our minds here. So aside from that, I'm just kind of looking before we kind of do a quick eye test, because I like to do both, because sometimes I catch things kind of doing like a shimmer test outside of the microscope that I like to kind of go back for. So using both is never a bad thing. So here's the back. So there's the back. And so again, this bottom left corner that I was talking about that was kind of showing that bend was the one that we saw on the front side. And then what I'm doing right now to think out loud, so I'm looking, just kind of verifying some of those claims that I made about those edges. So this bottom edge right here that I was showing as not really wanting to put any really distilled water close to it, I think is still a good call. But I really think that this card will do extremely well, at least that's the hope, in the humidor and going under the plates to try to do our best on that corner. So that is what we're going to be doing on that. So what I like to do afterwards is, again, with the microfiber cloth, I just gently, anything that might be stuck onto it, whether it's just, in the unlikely event that there's some distilled water still left on it, or hair, or thumbprints, or anything like that, it's always good just to kind of take a microfiber cloth and kind of do a quick once over. And the other thing I also highly recommend is if you have a lint roller, to lint roll yours ahead of time, just to make sure that there's nothing stuck onto it, like a hair or from yourself or from your pets or whatever. Because I have a cat, and yeah, she loves to get into my stuff. So that is the Charizard for what we can do kind of during this phase 1. So what I'm going to be doing after stream is I'm going to be taking this into the humidor for a few sessions, try to fill in some of those small impacts, try to flatten out that bottom left-hand corner, and try to see how far we really can get. So I'm going to put this in a new sleeve, and then I'll just put that in the humidor for some later treatment. Kind of seeing a card cleaning service or stream. Basically, the goal for what I like to focus on is just to see if we can do any improvements on the card first with the microscope, and then if there's anything that we need to go through the humidor That'll be off stream because humidor techniques typically take around 1 to 5 days. This one, after first look, it doesn't seem like it's going to take that long if a humidor is needed. But that will be off stream because I can't just, that'll be like watching paint dry. So we're going to look at the front, we're going to look at the back, and first off, we're going to try to see if you can kind of see that centering. So the 4 main grading criteria are centering, corners, edges, and surface. So that's what we're looking at today for those of you who are watching me on YouTube and Twitch. So that's the front of that bad boy. And so the centering is looking to be a little bit, for this one, it might be a little bit thicker on that left side than the right, but we'll measure it here. And then the back, obviously, there's really no big borders, but we're going to take a look under the microscope. So we're going to put it on. So I have these little soft pads that I always put my cards onto when we're looking at these cards. So some of the tools that you're going to be seeing me use today. So first off is right now, this is just a mixture of distilled water. Nothing else. There's really nothing in most cases you really need. Next, I like to use 2 specific types of Q-tips. One that's a pointed edge, and then one with more of like a rougher edge. And then if I need to, I have another kind of cleaning tip, just in case if I need it for a little bit more kind of surface area. The other one that I always talk about is a microfiber cloth. It's no different than what you use to clean your glasses with, stuff like that, so not too bad. And then I have a microfiber towel off to the side if we really need it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're also going to take a look at the microscope that you see right here. So this is a Tomlov D201. And so this allows me to really take a look at the card really up close. So right now, we're going to be kind of doing 2 things. We're going to be looking at it both under the microscope as well as kind of a shine test outside the microscope. Because certain angles, because we can only really see this on a 2D plane. So then we're just really kind of looking, because the big thing that we really have to pay attention to, and I'm actually going to move some of my lights here to look more from like a side, is the kind of the prismatic holographic of this card makes it extremely difficult to really kind of find some issues. So one that I see right off the bat, and I'll kind of point this out with my Q-tip here, is we have a little bit of something stuck in that flame. So you can kind of see if I press down, you can kind of see those little spots here. So we're just going to do a very, very gentle kind of sweep across that. And so this one is pretty standard. And so so what I'm doing right now off camera is I'm just wiping off the excess water, because it really doesn't need to be that wet. Best way I can explain it is if you kind of breathe on the back of your wrist. We're going to see if we can address some of those, if they are. And again, don't worry about anything that you're kind of seeing kind of left on there. Since we're looking at it very magnified, it'll come off pretty easily. And that, for example, is probably within the foil itself. So another thing that I like to test is if I kind of go over it with the drier end of the Q-tip, if I feel anything raised, that tells me that I can keep going. But in this instance, after that first pass and that not really going, you kind of see it kind of reflect in different angles. It's more on that foil than anything on the actual card. So no need to really tackle it anymore. You can kind of see a lot more of those little pockets showing up on the silver as well. So the next thing is we have a little bit of some indentation here along the wings. So this will be a good instance of, honestly, some very basic humidor treatment. So sometimes with these little impacts here, so you can kind of see right here the tip of my Q-tip as well as here. So 1, 2, and the rest of it is just the cardstock, but these 2 in particular will be a good attempt at putting it in the humidor, letting that kind of puff up a little bit to kind of fill in some of those. I've done some tests on those in the past, and hopefully it comes out pretty nice. And so that's more or less what I'm kind of seeing on the rest of the card, is these little pressure indents kind of on the surface of the card. So as we kind of go across here, again, we really need to pay attention because the hollow is really reflective of this light, right? So some of these are kind of getting hidden in some of this holographic, so we really have to pay attention. So a lot of this here on the green section, so that's more of just and I just kind of already got rid of it before even opening my mouth. But that was just like some white cardstock that might have gotten stuck onto the card, either kind of in transit or just out of the pack. However, but it's just as simple as just simply wiping it off, and we're good. So this one, and we might be able to see it when we look at it in person, but that edge is a little bit kind of folded up there. So again, this one's going to be pretty good at a very basic humidor treatment. And normally, my baseline for humidors is I typically keep it at 70% humidity. And for cards, it really just depends. Sometimes I leave it in, from 20 to 45 minutes. It really does range, to be quite honest. So you really kind of have to keep a kind of an eye on it as you kind of go through these. So really, that's like the biggest thing. Now, a few of you might be seeing some scratches on the card, and again, I don't do anything that actually fills in some of these scratches. So, for example, the neck of this Charizard. So I don't use anything like waxes or chemicals or filler or anything like that. The only thing that I use is distilled water, Q-tips, and that's pretty much it. Because the techniques that I do basically address things that are added onto a card, and I'm not actually using anything that adds to a card, like what I just talked about before. So when I talk about scratches, there's really not much I can do personally, because these are all, the assumption is that these are all going to be tried to be submitted into PSA. So really, upon, the magnification here, under the microscope, there really wasn't anything major dirt or debris that really stuck out. The only thing that really stuck out in the microscope was really just small impacts, was really the big thing. Now, in terms of the surface, we looked at that. So really the only corner that I was talking about, that's why it's easier to see under the microscope, is going to be this bottom right corner. So you can kind of see that folded a little bit. So something like this. So if we kind of gently look into the side. So the nice thing is that green upper layer where the hollow isn't actually peeling off. So this does have a chance to be flattened out a little bit, because that cardstock in the center hasn't really detached from the upper hollow layer.